Welcome to Let's Talk Migraine, where we talk about some of the hottest topics faced by people who live with this disabling and complex neurological disorder that affects nearly 40 million people in the US and 1 billion globally. My name is Shoshana Lipson, and I want to give a special welcome to our patient advocate panel, Atkisson, Angel Paschall-Harmon, and Erica Carrasco. All four of us live with migraine, but we want to remind you that nothing we say here should be taken as medical advice. We're speaking from our own experience and encourage you to partner with your doctor in any medical decisions. Also, a special thank you to our sponsors, without whom we wouldn't be able to offer this program, which is part of the Empowering Patient Voices project. You can learn more about that on our website, migrainemeanderings.com. So today we're going to be talking about what happens after you're diagnosed, or if you suspect you have migraine but may not have an official diagnosis, and why it's important to take it seriously. So let's start out with you, Erica. Why is it so important for people who live with migraine to take this disease seriously?
For me, like with both my children, they also live with migraine, and I do not want them to become chronic. So what we did was, since I was already an established migraine patient, I was already chronic, I set them up with a headache specialist right away. And even though they weren't chronic or had symptoms similar to mine, I started them with their doctor, the headache specialist, and if they felt they needed a preventative, they started a preventative. Otherwise, they were given acute medications. And like my daughter, she takes only acute medications because she's not chronic. My son, on the other hand, does take a prevention, and he does take an acute medication. So that's the key, is to keep them from becoming chronic. And that's why we went that route. It was just going straight to a headache specialist. And luckily for them, maybe not for me, but for them, I was already chronic. I've already gone through this for years, so I knew exactly what to do.
Absolutely. That's great. What about Erin or Angel? You know, why would you say it's so important for people to live, to take this disease seriously?
Well, it's important because we don't know exactly what other underlying conditions we might have. It's important to take notes of what our symptoms are and what our experiences are, so that we're not just popping a pill and hoping it goes away. There's something underlying there that needs to be addressed with the doctor.
And for me, it's so that we know that it's not our fault, that this is a condition that we live with, but we are not our condition. And by taking this seriously, looking at all the avenues for some level of relief gives us a sense of agency that we would no longer have.
Right, absolutely. And I think really the only a couple of things I would add to what you were saying is that I know for myself that, my migraine has got worse and worse as time has gone on. And I often wonder, if I've been able to have access to effective treatment early on in my childhood or in my teens or even in my college years, would it really have progressed this far? Would it have quantified as much? And when I was a child, obviously there weren't the treatments available that there are now, but there was nothing available. But that's one of the reasons it's so important. Migraine is a progressive disease, which means that it can chronify, it can get worse, get harder to treat, and it really impacts your life. It's not just a headache, right? In short, it's not just a headache. And that kind of brings us to, our next question, which is, why is it important to communicate with our doctors? Because, sometimes we'll just feel like we just had to push through. We just got to suffer. It's just a headache. But it is important to find a doctor and to communicate with them. So, Erin, what are your thoughts about that? Why is that so important?
Well, it's important because, and I like to call it a short circuit, like your body's short circuiting. It's important to communicate with your doctor what your symptoms are, because they might only be treating the head pain when we've got nausea, we've got vertigo, we've got all kinds of different things that can affect us individually, depending on the attack. And it's important for us to communicate that with the doctor so that they're not just treating one of the symptoms and they're not just looking at it from a one-sided standpoint. Telling us to take a over-the-counter medication for a headache might not treat the other things that are going on. So it's important that we're honest with the doctor, and even the embarrassing things, we got to let them know what's going on. Otherwise, they can't help us.
Absolutely. What about you, Erica?
Yeah, so like with my doctor, I have the ability to message him. So I'll send him a message. If I have a migraine attack and everything I've thrown at it, I've thrown the kitchen sink at it, and it is not relieving, I will message my doctor and I'll be like, look, I've tried everything you've taught me in the past, everything I already know what to do for myself, and nothing is working. And I'm miserable. It's been like 3, 4 days. I can't seem to get any relief. Like I'm about to go to the emergency room. So he'll tell me like, it's okay, like let's figure this out. And he'll send me medications to the pharmacy to hopefully like stop the migraine within the next 24 hours. And that's how we work together. I feel very lucky that I'm able to do that, because with some doctors you don't have that type of relationship. But finding that doctor who's willing to communicate with you, there's a lot of portal systems out there now. Like technology's come a long way, so now you can send messages to your doctors and kind of communicate without having to make an appointment. And so for me, that's how I communicate with my doctor.
Yeah, that sounds it's so important, and it's interesting because we have the same doctor, you and I, Erica,
Right.
and I totally agree. It's really life changing to have a doctor who you can just message and they actually get back to you. So if you need to make a change, if you're really not doing well, you don't have to set an appointment for a week or 2 weeks or 2 months away. They'll just deal with it immediately. But it's so important to communicate with your doctor, because migraine is on a spectrum, right? Everywhere from very infrequent and not severe to super frequent and very, very severe. And your doctor doesn't know what's going on unless you actually tell them. So, Angel, what would you say are some of the most important things to include in a conversation with your doctor about migraine?
Your symptoms. Mine, like you mentioned earlier, they have progressively increased and they change. I've actually had additional diagnoses, and that can only be made through that constant conversation of send a message in the portal. Like, this is not working. All right, so let's try something else. Let's do some additional testing or referrals to other doctors to see if there's something else going on that we aren't aware of. And by doing that, it gives you, again, that sense of agency, so that when you feel that you have that relationship, that it impacts how you see your life. And so I can't overstress how important it is to be open and communicate, especially if you have a doctor who is in a partnership with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of us have a tendency not to tell our doctor all the things that they really need to know, right? Like not just the symptoms, but the impact it's having on your life, and your treatment goals, because our treatment goals may be different than what the doctor may have for us, because you may not understand what we're going through. Like for me, my treatment goal, or one of them, is to be able to do an event like this, and be able to have the medication I need so that I can push through if I have to, or go to a special event like a child's wedding or something like that. That's one of my biggest treatment goals. It's not 100% pain relief. That's, to me, it's like pie in the sky. I would love that, but that's not, my immediate goal. It's just to have some kind of quality of life, which kind of leads us to our next question. And I'm going to ask you this, Erica, is that sometimes the doctor that we see, either when we're first diagnosed or later on, is not necessarily the best doctor for us. And part of the reason for that is that there's no mandatory education in medical school on headache disorders. And even in neurology residencies, there are many of them that don't have any education on headache disorders, which is shocking, and a lot of people don't know. So what would be some of the examples, Erica, that you would point out to someone where they may need to look beyond the doctor they're currently seeing and find a certified headache specialist, or if they're seeing their primary care physician, when they need to get a referral to a general neurologist? And maybe you could explain a little bit about the difference between them.
So when I first started having symptoms and I didn't know what was happening, I didn't know what headache or migraine. I mean, I knew what headache was, but I didn't know what migraine was. I'd never really heard that before. So I saw my primary physician, and that was the very first time I heard the word migraine. And they treated me. She treated me with a medication that was never for migraine. It was an antidepressant, actually. And so I took that for a while, had side effects, and I was like, this isn't working. So I kind of just stopped seeing the doctor completely. It wasn't until after I was in a car accident that I started having really, really bad symptoms with migraine. And so I went back to the doctor. They thought I had Bell's palsy because I have hemiplegic migraine, and so my face droops. And so, Bell's palsy was my diagnosis, but then it kept coming back and back and back, right? So I was like, okay, that's not what it is. This is over my head. And my primary is the one who sent me to a neurologist. But it was still a mess from there. There are some headache conditions, migraine conditions, that are so difficult to diagnose because they have rare symptoms or just because the doctor doesn't understand that that's actually a migraine symptom. So I went from rheumatologists, I went to all different specialties of doctors thinking, oh, well, maybe it's this, because I had muscle pain along with my attacks. And so I saw different types of specialties with no answers. It took me about maybe 5 to 6 years to actually get a hemiplegic migraine diagnosis. And that's after traveling from city to city within Texas. Even with that, it was still difficult. So I eventually did make my way to a headache center where there was several headache specialists. And it was there that I started receiving actual migraine treatment. And that was a change in my whole entire journey because I had already lost faith in the medical community. I'd been treated really badly. I had medical PTSD from how, me and my family were treated. I was treated like a drug seeker. So for me, seeing a specialist, a headache specialist, was so important. It could have prevented so much mental health symptoms that I now experience had I been able to have been told, see a headache specialist right away. So you're so right when you say that the medical community doesn't necessarily teach in medical school what they need to know for headache treatment. So when you don't see a headache specialist, you could be searching for answers for a really, really long time. And in that time frame, your mental health is affected. So it's kind of a full body thing that you have to treat at some point.
Absolutely. It's a great point. Aaron and Angel, who do you see? Do you see a certified headache specialist? Do you see a general neurologist? Do you see someone different? And, is that working for you? Or, what would make you want to get a second opinion or see a different doctor?
So I actually see a general neurologist who has a passion for migraine. She will say she's not a headache specialist, but in her off time, that is what she likes to read. And I also see a specialist for my eyes because of the impact that migraine. And I'm actually waiting, unfortunately, for another diagnosis. I just recently had a spinal tap, things of that sort. But it helps in that regard to have a holistic. But we have just recently talked about me seeing a headache specialist because of some of the problems she has with getting approval for medication. And she thinks that I would have a better outcome with a headache specialist. She tries everything she can to include if there's a free coupon that we can use in the meantime, but possibly better outcome with a headache specialist. And so that's actually looking to work with your doctor, the doctor that you and Erica are using.
Interesting. So that's really interesting. What about you, Aaron?
Well, currently I am seeing a general neurologist. I just got switched to a general neurologist that handles other issues that I'm dealing with. So I was with the same neurologist for several years before that, who is just doing head pain now. So if I need to switch back for some reason, hopefully they'll let me do that. I've seen other neurologists before that I was referred to from my general practitioner that just wasn't very good. So I just kind of went through the cycle of trying to find somebody new. Now I'm on another journey with this new doctor because I just had my first appointment with him yesterday, and we didn't really discuss migraine. We talked about some other issues that I'm dealing with. So I guess I'm going to feel this one out and see where things go with it. But, I've got to make sure that I'm letting him know everything that I'm dealing with from a migraine standpoint. So I don't know his background on migraine, unfortunately. But I'm going to find out soon enough. So
that makes sense. And it's interesting what you said about, you didn't talk about migraine in your recent appointment. I'm thinking when I go to see my primary care physician, I rarely talk about migraine. I have so many other things, so many other listed diagnoses. And for me, that's one of the reasons I like to see specialists, because you can't possibly go through everything in one primary care physician appointment, especially if you have chronic migraine where you're more likely to have other diagnoses as well. So if they were to say, what's your pain like today? Well, what are you talking about? My head, my joints, my stomach, in my neck, it's really hard. So there's no way you can get through everything with one doctor. We did just get a live question, and just to let people know that please feel free to ask your questions. Remember, we're not doctors, we're just patients. We're people who live with migraine, but we're happy to answer from our own experience. So this person asked, that their migraine attacks are progressing. now experiencing multiple types of migraine. What is the best way to manage it? So it's a very broad question, but I think that kind of brings us back to, when is it time to see a different doctor? When is it time to see a certified headache specialist? And we do a lot of live events in migraine meandering with headache specialists. And so you're able to learn from that. We have a lot of those videos on our YouTube channel as well. But I think that if your migraine attacks are progressing, if they're getting worse, more frequent, different symptoms, and you're not seeing a doctor who is educated in headache disorders. So now I'm not just talking about someone who calls himself, quote unquote, a headache specialist, but someone who is actually a certified headache specialist, which means they've gone through extensive education and they're required to have ongoing education as well, which is really important because migraine is a very fast moving field at the moment in terms of research and development. So that may be a time where you want to see a different doctor. If you're only seeing your primary care physician or your general practitioner, it may be time to say, okay, I need a referral to go see a general neurologist. If you don't need a referral, just go see one yourself. If you are seeing a general neurologist, then it may be time to go see a certified headache specialist, which is not the same as a general neurologist. And just bear in mind what I said at the beginning, that some general neurologists were not required to do headache disorder education in their neurology residencies. So they may know no more about migraine than you do. They may even know a lot less than you do. So that's a great example of a time where I'd say, hey, get a second opinion, go see another doctor. There are some really great ones. There's a virtual headache clinic that I go to and Erica goes to. Fabulous, fabulous doctors. We can put a link for that in the comments in case you're interested. Watch some of our videos. Go to our website. We have a migraine treatment toolbox. You can look at that. But definitely, if your migraine attacks are getting worse, that's a time to see a different doctor, get a different opinion, and try to see what is going on. Also, I would say if a doctor is rude, if they are gaslighting you, if they're inaccessible. So if you have a migraine attack that lasts 3 days, more than 3 days, and you're into status migrainosis, and you can't get in touch with your doctor, and the earliest appointment you can get is a month away, that really doesn't work. That's when people end up in the emergency room. So it's important to have a doctor who's accessible. And the only other thing I'd say about this, before we go on to the next question, is that if you're having issues getting your medications approved, that is also something to kind of bear in mind if you're looking at, is it time to change doctors? Because some medical practices are better at getting medications approved. And so many migraine medications are new nowadays that a lot of them require prior authorizations and then further appeals and formulary exceptions. And it's chaotic and time consuming, but your doctor and your doctor's office especially makes a really big difference. So that may also be a time to get a second opinion or go see a different doctor. So bearing in mind all of that, why is it so important to be informed as a patient about migraine disease? Aaron, I'm going to pick on you for this one. Why would you say that is really important?
Well, you kind of covered part of that. A lot of doctors are not educated in migraine. It's important for us to seek out that information, go to a community like Migraine Meanderings and find up-to-date information, join a community online or wherever, find that you can find that information. Because a lot of times we have, like this live event here, we're a panel of people that have experience. There are other people out there that may not have the same experiences that we do, and we can all kind of bounce ideas off each other. There's also, new medication, new devices that are coming out, and in order for us to advocate for ourselves, we can, learn that information, go into the doctor and explain to them, what we've got, explain to them, some of the new devices. That's how I got one of my devices. Was I found it on online that this was approved and it was one of the biggest devices to come out. My neurologist had no idea. I messaged him through the portal. I was like, hey, this is coming out. It's like, I've never heard of it. Let me get back with you. And 2 weeks later, I've got it in my mailbox. So it was, it was great. But if I had not done my own research and advocated for myself, I probably wouldn't have found out about it until it became more well known in the public. So, it's important for us to be able to advocate for ourselves, notate everything that we want to talk to the doctor about so we can remember it when we go in there, because a lot of times we have that migraine brain and we can't remember some of the things. So it's important to write that down so we have it available to us when we get in there.
Absolutely. That makes total sense. Erica or Angel, what are your thoughts on that?
For me, just to piggyback on what Erica said very early on, there's so much misinformation about migraine. And so when you're hearing, oh, just put your hands in hot and cold water and that's going to take away your migraine, or there's got to be something that can be done. But I think that all of us on this panel also have children that also suffer with migraine. And so the more information we know, the more we can be advocates for our children, and we can help dismiss some of the stigma around migraine. So not only are we advocates become for ourselves, we sit on panels like this. We teach others how to advocate for themselves. And so I think that the more education, I think all of us are getting our small little education of what new device, what new medication, what is pending to be FDA approved. And so I think that helps us know more. And then we become patient advocates for ourselves and others.
Yeah, there's so
Absolutely.
much misinformation within migraine, within the community ourselves. Like we're advocates, but even within people who are informed about migraine, still are misinformed about migraine in some aspects. You know, everybody's migraine condition is different. My migraine attacks are completely separate from someone else with the exact same type of migraine. And so even within our small communities of migraine, you know, the subtypes, there's so many. Many people think migraine is just migraine. It's not. There are so many different types of migraine. And within each subtype, there's misinformation. So a lot of symptoms overlap with each other and they overlap with other health conditions. I have other health conditions that are comorbid to migraine, and sometimes I don't know what symptom that belongs to. I can't tell you if that's migraine or is it possibly my possible POTS diagnosis. Like I can't tell you sometimes. I don't know. So being informed about migraine and your other health conditions will hopefully make you a more well-rounded patient so that when you see a doctor who doesn't know about migraine and who's trying to treat you, you might actually be educating them, but that's okay. Try to come with the right links to give them, maybe if you feel they don't know too much about your condition, and eventually, you know, they'll probably refer you out to a specialist.
Yeah. So true. That's absolutely true. I've seen doctors sometimes and I just kind of watch their eyes glaze over as I've talked to them, and I know what's coming next. I'm going to refer you out because they really are not
Right.
sure what to do. And that's kind of sad, but it's the truth. You know, I hear from a lot of people in my community, and I'm sure all of us have had this type of thing where people say, I'm just too ill. You know, I'm too ill to inform myself and too ill to get on the websites and to learn or to attend talks or anything else. And we totally get it. Everybody with migraine totally gets that, especially if you have chronic migraine or frequent migraine. It's very hard to stay on top of education like this. And I think we kind of feel like we shouldn't have to, that our doctors should be the ones who do that. And so I often say it's not fair, but it is what it is. You know, it's not fair. You know, we should, in an ideal world, there will be more than enough certified headache specialists for all of us. And we wouldn't have to be as on top of it as we are. But it is a reality. We need, you know, to be the CEO of our healthcare, basically. And the other thing on the positive side is that migraine takes so much away from us. We have so much control that is lost that we can't do anything about. But learning is something that we can do something about. It gives us some of that power back to us and changes our focus a little bit. And being empowered is an amazing feeling when you live with a chronic disease that takes away that control as well. So just from that positive thing, it's really important when it comes to what kind of information you're going to get. I don't think any of you mentioned this. I'm just going to jump in with that, is that there's a lot of garbage out there. I know that a couple of you kind of touched on that. Things like, you know, putting banana peels on your forehead or drinking, you know, cream of tartar and water, or, you know, just believing that your migraine's going to stop or is not going to calm, you know, power of positive thinking, you know, bringing that into reality. And so it's really important to make sure that the information you get is current, it's evidence-based. There are amazing advocacy organizations, any organization that belongs to CHAMP, which is Coalition of Headache and Migraine Patients. They offer amazing current evidence-based information. So it's really, really important to make sure that you're getting your information from quality places, and not from other organizations or just random newspapers or random articles. Don't want to name any, but I'm sure, off the top of our heads, we could all come up with some. Just make sure that you're getting it from a quality source that is current and that is evidence-based. We're going to kind of shift a little bit from, being an empowered patient. And I know that we're covering a lot of things in this topic. It's designed to be kind of general, so we're jumping around. And I want to talk about having a support network. So these are all things that kind of come along with having migraine once you've been diagnosed, finding the right doctor, talking to your doctor, learning yourself. And then we have this, why is it important to have a support network? So Angel, I'm going to throw that out at you. Why do you find it important to have a support network?
Prior to finding my network, which includes the three of you, I was on an island. I felt extremely alone, and I was gotten so accustomed to people discounting my migraine or saying, oh, there's got to be something that can be done. And then it felt like it was my fault that I had migraine. Within this network, I am no longer alone. And that's why I've become so passionate about this network and letting my voice be heard, is that, we need each other so that we're not alone. I mean, and within our network, we have, there's times where I'm barely having one eye open, but I'll go to, our group and I'm reading other people, and I've been encouraged, and I encourage other people as well. So really, it's to get rid of the isolation that comes with a chronic illness. So that's why it's extremely important to me. And I encourage everyone to be a part of our amazing organization.
Absolutely. That's super helpful. And for those who don't know, Angel and I met up in Indianapolis, of all places. Neither of us lived there. A couple of months ago, it was totally random. We were both there. I was there for an advocacy event, and Angel was there traveling on business. She saw that I'd made a post on Facebook that I was there, and we turned out it was like less than half a mile away our hotels were. So I took the opportunity to jump on a little scooter, which I'd never done before. I was super excited about doing a scooter and went to see her. But the reason I'm sharing this is that I was so excited to see someone who I'd only ever met virtually, because Angel had become a friend and has become a friend, as have, Erica and Aaron and so many others who I've met through this. When you have friends who live with migraine, who understand the challenges, it normalizes you, and you can just sit down and just have a normal conversation. You don't have to say, oh, please, I need to go sit somewhere where the lights are dim, right? Or I can't go do this, right? Or the perfume, right? Or it's too hot outside. It's like, we just all get it. And that camaraderie is really, really, it's just huge. So, Erica, what would you say? Why do you find that this is most important to you? And how can people actually create that support network?
For me, the support groups, I'm in so many. First of all, I'm in a lot of different support groups, and so I'm not consistent in every single one of them, but I do peek in there, and I read stories and I'm like, oh yeah, I totally understand that. And I'll write like my little piece of the story, right? Or I started as a blogger in migraine. I was just diagnosed. They wanted me to journal. I'm a techie. So I was like, well, I'm going to blog. And so that's how I started. I wasn't looking for a support group necessarily, but it just happened. And as I continued to blog and then started, joining groups, I found a family of people who completely understood where I was coming from. They're not in my body. They don't feel every single thing I felt, but they understood the mental health side of how I was feeling. And so sometimes that part of living with a chronic illness, chronic migraine, is really tough. We have a hard time sometimes wanting to go see a mental health specialist because of how doctors have basically told you it's all in your head. There's really nothing wrong with you. So finding support groups and support online is where I was able to kind of start my mental health journey. And if I were to put you in my head so you could see what I'm thinking, if I'm with my family or I'm with friends, I don't necessarily want to say, oh man, my head's starting to hurt, because then it's like, do we need to go home? Do you need to go to the emergency room? It's like immediately it turns into an emergency, right? And so instead, I'll kind of jump on my phone and I'm like, my head's starting to hurt. I'm out to dinner. I don't want to disappoint anybody, but I might have to. It's okay. Like, that's okay. Take a deep breath. It's okay if you need to go home. And that's really hard to do because that's where all the guilt comes in. You feel really bad because you're letting people down. So my family, my support group online, no matter what support group I join, like they all get it and they rally for you. They're like, no, if you feel like you need to go home, go home. And so it's kind of that angel on the shoulder that's like, you're okay. And that's what I get from support groups.
Absolutely. I love that. That's a really great response. What about you, Erin? And I'm gonna kind of come at it from a different slant. Don't hate me for this, because I'm just gonna throw it at you. But why, having a support network is a double-edged process. So for part, it's the support that we get, right? And part is the support that we give other people. So part of which is the four of us doing this today. For example, I think we all have a migraine right now, or at least three of us have a migraine. But here we are doing this. So Erin, why is it important for you to actually do things to help people who have migraine? Why do you take the time and the energy to do that? What difference does that make to you?
Well, for me, my migraines have changed. I was chronic for years, like at least 6 years. It was awful, and now it's kind of episodic. It's it's changed a little bit, but it's important for me because I've suffered in silence like a lot of people have, and from a man's standpoint, a lot of men suffer in silence because of the stigma of just manning up. So I want to be a voice to those men out there that are scared to speak up and let them know that it's okay. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to talk about it with your doctor. It's okay to go get mental health specialists to talk to, and really just I want people to that were in my shoes to understand that it's there's nothing to be ashamed about. We didn't ask for this. This is something that we can't fix on our own. I'm a fixer. That's what I like to do. I don't want to ask for help. Sometimes you have to ask for help, and as controversial as it might be, I know that everybody's got so many different triggers, but the stress and internalizing things that we can't fix ourselves can create tension in our body that can turn into a migraine. So stress not in and of itself is a trigger, but what it triggers in your body, as anybody that holds that within themselves, but especially guys like me who just try to man up, if you will. It's important to be able to go and talk to somebody, have a network, have your friends, have your buddies that you talk to, like, hey, my head's killing me today. I can't do this. I've recently found a therapist who actually has migraine as well, and she's had to cancel on me before. I totally get it. I understand. It's the understanding, the camaraderie, the community that we have, and I know I'm rambling on here, but I want to make sure that people know that people that have been in my shoes are able to speak up and go help themselves, that it's okay.
Right. And I love that. I love the fact that, I was so excited the first time I met you and realized that you were willing to do things like this, because, people still see migraine as a women's disease, and it's not. 3/4 approximately, it's expected are women, but 25% are thought to be men, and maybe it's higher because men tend to talk about it less. We don't know, but we know that it's not an exclusively women's disease. I have 3 sons. All 3 of them have migraines. So I'm passionate about this. I know with you too, Erica and Angel, you do as well. And so I love the fact that you, Erin, are willing to speak up, because people see you as, wow, that's a guy, and he's talking about migraine and he's being honest about it. So you're really impacting people's lives. I would also say that I know for myself, when I'm reaching out to other people, it takes my mind off how awful I feel or all the things that I've lost in my life. And it's very easy to get kind of embroiled into that. And a lot of us struggle with anxiety and depression, and when we start thinking about how much our life has been impacted with things we can't do, the regret, the guilt, the shame, all the other, negative emotions that we can have, it's very easy to go into this spiral down. When I focus on other people, when I reach out to other people, it helps take me out of that pit. So it's kind of selfish. I love helping people. I love it, but it's also good for me. And I have friends who I can cry with them. I can just share with them. I can ask them questions. And ones who will just send me these stupid, funny memes where I just laugh, because laughter is good for the soul. So, I love it, with people who understand migraine. That support network is super important. Pivoting again, we have another 3 questions left to go. Again, if anybody has any live questions, please let us know and we'll definitely answer those. But Erica, why is it important to set realistic expectations? And I know that's a really broad question, because realistic expectations about what? So you can pick anything out of that. Why is it important to be realistic when it comes to migraine?
In the beginning, when I was first diagnosed, I am the most upbeat, sees the bright side, happy-go-lucky, always smiling, always the positive person, right? Like, that's just my natural personality. That's changed a little bit over the migraine years, but that's how I started. And so when I first saw the doctor, I'm like, oh, they're just going to give me some medication and I'll be fine. That's kind of the expectation I had come to. Everybody's like, oh, just go see the doctor. They'll give you some meds and you'll be okay. So that's the expectations I had, and they were so unrealistic. And I would learn that over time. Every time I'd see a new doctor, I'm like, okay, this is it. Like, this is the one, and it wasn't. And so I got broken down like so many times over the years. But now, after experiencing all of that, I'm a very resilient person. So when I go to the doctor today for maybe some new symptoms or just a new doctor for whatever reason, like we moved or something, my expectations are more of, let me take a deep breath. I'm going to walk in there. I'm going to give them my story, and then we'll see what kind of doctor they are. I'll pay attention. Are they listening to me? Are they asking me the right questions? Are they taking into consideration what maybe my husband or my kids are saying in the room? Because I bring them with me now. So all those different things. And then I decide if they're the right doctor for me or not. And if I feel like they don't meet my realistic expectations, because I feel like I have a high expectation of doctors now, but because I deserve that for me. I deserve to be treated like a person and not just a 15-minute patient that they need to get out the door. I'm okay with having a 15-minute appointment. That appointment needs to be quality. So maybe some people may see that as an unrealistic expectation, but I love myself and I feel like that's what I deserve, which is why, Shoshana, probably you and I have the same doctor.
Right. Absolutely. I have very high standards for my headache specialist in specific. I do have high standards, but also for my primary care physician. When my insurance changed in 2018, I went through 6 different primary care physicians before I settled on one. And the 6th one, first thing she did when she walked in, she said, I've been looking at all your records and I see your doctor skipping. Are you going to just go on to the next one after me? Should I waste my time? And I said, well, that entirely depends on you. That I'm looking for a doctor who will partner with me in my healthcare. And I was with her for 5 years until she went concierge. Unfortunately, she was the best primary care physician I'd ever had. But, I was doctor skipping because there are expectations that we have about, the type of healthcare that we should have. And so realistically, doctors are not God. They don't know everything. They can't cure us of everything. But a realistic expectation is to have a doctor who will listen to you, who will partner with you, who will acknowledge when they don't have the answer and may need to refer you out, and will even help you find, another doctor to care for that particular aspect of your healthcare. So that's a really important expectation. What about you, Erin? What would you say is important regarding having a realistic expectation?
Oh gosh, I guess having a realistic expectation that you may just get shoved out the door to a specialist.
Right.
Understanding that I'm, that you're going to go through different doctors to find what's going to work for you. Finding the doctor that's going to pay attention to you, like my journey right now with my new neurologist. He actually spent about 40 minutes with me on a virtual call, not related to migraine. So that actually gives me a little bit of hope that he might listen to me about migraine. So my expectation there is he spent enough time with me about other nerve issues that I've got, maybe he will spend the time with me on that. So hopefully that's a realistic expectation.
Yeah. What about, that's great, Aaron. What about you, Angel? Like, I'm going to ask you more specific, just kind of narrow it down. Why is it important to have realistic expectations about our lifestyle and adjustments we may need to make?
I'm glad you asked that question because that's really, when I think about really expectations, um, often when we do these conversations, I talk about grace and that grace about ourselves. And that was a journey for me because I am an Army wife, which means I am used to being a solo parent, which means I can do all things. And I had to come to realization that sometimes I can't. And that's okay. And being very vocal that mom can't do it this time, and that has helped free me. I would love to say that I don't have mom guilt or friend guilt or family guilt. I still have that. But I do know that if I spend all day tomorrow cleaning the house in the middle of the storms that are coming through the South, that I might also be laid up on Sunday, and that I may not get to pain free. I don't think I really even know what pain free is with the various different diagnoses I have, but can I get to functional? And functional is okay. And that is, I guess, like the spoon method. Functional depends on the day. And so that's my realistic expectation of how I take care of myself. And in turn, teaching my children on this. Sometimes you got to push through. Sometimes, son, he's a football player in summer heat. You might have to push through today. But tomorrow, maybe you don't have to go to a film session. Maybe this time you can sit down. So that's the expectation
Yeah.
realistically for me.
No, I love that. I think that's great. And so true as well. I think another one for me I've had to learn is that, it's important to have a realistic expectation about what my treatments can or can't do or may not do and how long it may take them to do it. So for example, we live in a society where we want to take a pill and just have whatever we're dealing with just stop. But like when it comes to preventive migraine treatment, it can take, sometimes it works really quickly, but sometimes it can take months to work. And you got to find the correct dose and go for 3 months or more. Sometimes it could take up to 6 months or even longer to get the full efficacy. Being realistic, you may also have some side effects, but sometimes those side effects, while they're not nice, may be better than the migraine attacks that you're having. So now you're getting into balancing risk versus benefits. And that's not easy to do it. So it's important to be realistic about what actually happens when you take migraine medication or use a migraine device, what the risk is of not treating migraine, which is, among other things, that it may chronify, it may progress and get worse, and how long it's going to take, how patient you have to be. And it's really hard to be patient when you're in pain. But if you're not realistic about the time frame, then on top of the patients, now you're super stressed and wondering, well, do I need to try something else? Do I have to go back to my doctor? So it's really important. I saw that we had a live question here, and I'm actually going to we have two live questions. I'm going to ask this first one of you, Erica, and it is, how do you stay active with daily migraine attacks, or, however frequent you have them? How do you manage that?
Sometimes I don't actually. So I may stay on my couch watching television all day long. And I have had to learn that that's okay. I know that's harder to do when you have small children. For me, my kids are both in college now, so they're self-sufficient. But I remember when they were younger, I was a military wife too. My husband was in the Air Force. And I would be on the couch and my kids would be super small. My daughter would bring me a wet towel, put it on my head and, go about her day playing, and just, they both check on me every once in a while. Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Just watching TV. So that made it really tough to stay active. For me, I do have physical disabilities along with my migraine attacks. My whole left side either almost paralyzes or it's in severe pain. So I can't be active, like physically active. And so I have to just lay down all day. Now, I will say there are days where I miraculously have no symptoms whatsoever. Like this past Friday, I went to a Texas Rangers game, had an amazing time with my family,
Wow.
but then I was in bed for a whole week after that.
Right.
And it was tough.
Yeah.
So I may be able to be active on some days, but I also might pay for it after that. So I kind of just have to make sure I take care of myself. I make sure if I'm going to have an active day, I make sure to take about 3 drinks or, 3 full water bottles of electrolytes that day. I eat regularly throughout the day so that I don't get hungry. And I also have to make sure I don't overeat because that's also a trigger. So undereating and overeating, so I have to be just right.
Right.
I also make sure to pace myself, like I'm not walking too fast, and I'm taking a lot of breaks. So there's just, we're also different. So what I have to do to keep myself upright for, an event or for an activity might not be something that you have to do, but it just takes getting to know your body and knowing what you need for yourself to help you become active. And you may have to start really slow. Like, let's say you want to start exercising, you have exercise intolerance. You have to start really slow.
Right.
And, that's just, you just have to know your body.
Right, absolutely. And for those people who don't, may not be familiar with the term exercise intolerance as it relates to migraine, if you've had migraine for a while, I'm sure you probably do know this, but for those who don't, unfortunately, one of the triggers for migraine for some people is exercise. If you have a migraine, almost unilateral, exercise is going to make it worse. That's one of the questions the doctor is likely to ask you to determine if you have migraine or not. But we also know that exercise, increases your endorphins and can help improve pain management. And for some people, even reduce the frequency or severity of your migraine attacks. So, like Erica says, it's like finding that balance of things you can do and can't do. It may be that you can't go to the gym anymore. You can't get your heartbeat as high as you may, have been able to in the past. You got to, I know for myself, I got to manage my heartbeat when I'm exercising. So I generally walk. That's really all I can do now. And like Erica says, I spend a lot of time on the couch or in my bed, read. Kindle's my best friend. Watch stupid movies that don't have bright flashing lights or, lots of shooting and loud noises. And so that's kind of one of the things. I would even add that to the being realistic pile of things. Being realistic about what your body can and can't do. With migraine it can be hard. Yes, Angel, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that has stood out for me is, especially in the past year, in the past year, past 15 months, I've completed a master's degree. I've gotten promoted. I've been the president of my civic organization. And what I'll get is, how do you do all that with chronic migraine? And so there becomes this false sense of, I am doing, that person is doing something wrong because of comparison. And I
Right.
constantly have to remind them that, but you're not seeing when that camera turns off. You're not seeing after I finish that meeting or what have you, or that paper that was late because I had to ask for an extension. And so what I would say to the person who asked that question is, don't compare yourself to how another person manages, because you still don't see the struggle behind, which goes back to that level of realistic and giving oneself grace.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. People ask me all the time how I do what I do. And it's a lot of it is just kind of counting the cost. For example, I go to headache conferences sometimes, and I went to one in Austin a few weeks ago. I was feeling fabulous before I left and had been feeling fabulous for a few weeks, which for me is very rare. And there was absolutely no way I wanted to break that fabulous streak. But I knew that 99% certain going to this conference would break it, and it did. I've had a constant migraine since then, up and down. Some days it's very low, but it's just there. Frequently during the week it will escalate. Do I regret going? No, I don't, because it was just so amazing to meet people, to learn, just to feel normal was really huge. But then there's a cost, and so you really have to figure that out yourself. But migraine is serious. So don't let anybody ever say to you that you just need to push through, just need to ignore it. The reality is the migraine generally has, a lot of restrictions on what we can do and can't do. I know we could just talk about that the whole time, but I know we're running out of time. So I do have a couple more questions, and I know that we have 2 more live questions as well. So let's make this kind of short answers if we can, talking to myself here as well. Aaron, figuring out how to explain to your friends and family how the diagnosis may impact your life. So let's narrow that down specifically to when you're first diagnosed or you're first trying to tell people, how do we figure that out? What to tell people about migraine?
Well, that's a long answer, but I'll make it short. I've had migraine since I was 7, so it's something that my family has already known about.
Right.
As an adult, workplace, I have to let. Actually, I lost my career due to migraine and vertigo because I used to have to climb telephone poles. Couldn't do that safely anymore. So now I'm self-employed. So anybody that I work with, I have to let them know, hey, if I'm not feeling well that day, I will do my best to show up, but I'll text you if something happens. One of my best friends knows about my the seriousness of the migraine condition, so he's familiar with that. I guess anybody that's been in close proximity sees you can generally see that on your face that you're struggling with something. So I guess just being honest with your friends and your family and your employer and letting them know what accommodations you might need at work. It's really hard to to deal with some of that sometimes, but you have to do it in order to move on with your life and to stay honest with people, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great answer. And actually, one of the live questions we had come in, this is kind of on the same topic. So, Erica, I'm going to pick on you for this. So the question is, this person wrote, I had an attack at a family dinner the other night, became very ill very quickly. How do you handle feeling embarrassed or ashamed and then guilty for ruining everyone else's time? Which kind of comes into what you tell people, and then how do you handle that yourself? What would you say about that?
Well, first of all, my heart rate accelerates, and that probably makes it worse.
Yeah.
But truly, I do get anxiety in those moments. I think that's just natural for most people, and that's a generalization, but I do get some anxiety because I'm like, am I gonna have to cancel? Because I am the type of person that worries about everybody else's feelings. So in my thought process is, if I cancel right now, are they gonna feel bad because they feel like they're gonna have to cancel the whole dinner, or things like that. My mind just goes out there, right? I have to kind of rein myself back in and make sure that I vocalize. I'll stand up, or I'll tell my husband who's sitting next to me, things like that. I'm like, look, I need to go home. And so I'll tell my kids, y'all stay. Everybody feels good. Y'all stay. I'm going to go home. My family's the type of family to be like, no, let's just get the food to go. We'll go home. And then I feel bad because I ruined dinner, right? That's kind of how it'll go. But that's just because they love me and they don't want me to miss out. So they're willing to go home with me and we'll all eat at the house. But in my mind, I'm like, no, y'all stay here so I can go home and be by myself because I just need to be alone with my migraine,
Right.
So it depends on your personality. What do you feel like you need? And so you kind of have to stand up for your needs and try not to let yourself go into that caregiver role of, I need to take care of everybody else. For my migraine attack, you kind of have to, it sounds selfish, but my therapist taught me that it's not. You have to take care of yourself, because it's kind of like the whole airplane analogy. You give yourself the oxygen mask before you can give it to your kid. And so it's that same type of thinking, take care of yourself so that you can take care of other people if you have, if you're in that place that you have to do that. So I will tell them, I'm having an attack. I either need to go sit in the car for a little bit so I get some quiet time, whatever I need, whatever I feel I need, I ask for that. It's hard sometimes, but it just depends. Also depends on the level of migraine it is. That's a lot to take into consideration too. Is it something I know I can probably sit through a whole dinner for? Then I'll do it. But if it's not and it's becoming more serious, then yeah, I just need to leave and I have to speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think it also partly depends on who you're with, right? So, if you're with your immediate family, if I'm with my husband or my kids, they know, they get it. But if I'm with, them and some other people who don't necessarily know, that could be more difficult. And then I always say I have a very busy committee in my head, and that committee says, you shouldn't be feeling like this. You're going to ruin everybody else's, time there. And why am I doing this again? And then the big one that's always like this big black cloud is, are they going to believe me? So I always worry, are they going to believe me? Or are they going to think that I'm lying, that I'm just making this up?
Or am I exaggerating?
Yes, am I exaggerating? Right, because then they'll say, well, you look fine.
Yeah.
you look fine 10 minutes ago, and people really don't understand. And so it's hard. I'm sure we actually did an event. We talked about this last year in one of our things about relationships. And it's really hard. All of us, I think, have lost friendships, or relationships we have got worse, some of them, because of this. And it's really important to find people who are not toxic, who will support you. And then to tell yourself, as much as that voice is telling you it's your fault, you should be doing more, you should be doing better, shouldn't be ruining everybody else's life. Speak back to that negative voice and say, this is not my fault. I didn't do anything to deserve this. I need to take care of myself. It's important to take care of myself. I'm going to be kind to myself, and, kind of speak back to, all those negative things with something positive that encourages you. It's so important to do that. I want to kind of touch really briefly. I know we're like 3 minutes left. I don't think we're even going to get to our last question, but we touched on this last year as well. Angel, I'm going to ask you this. So to do with accommodations. So if we're talking about how you explain to people why it's important to explain to people, why is it important that if you're a student that your teachers know, or at work that your employer knows, if your attacks are severe enough that it's going to impact, how you function?
I think it goes back to the guilt, because when you are vocalizing that, one, I am diagnosed with migraine, then once you make that a normative, then asking for the accommodations isn't as difficult. There have been times at work, I lead a team of 6 people, and with my migraine, I'll have problems with my speech and my vision. And now I've only had this team for about a year, but if we're in a meeting and then I start to stutter, someone will chat me, "Are you okay?" Or like my words might get jumbled. I'll misuse a word. "Angel, are you okay?" When when you're the director and you have a team depending on you, when they tell you, maybe you should take the rest of the day off, we got this. It helps them also normalize their own medical situations. It's helped me
Yeah.
be a better leader as far as academically, because we may have some viewers who are in school. You're not saying that you don't want to do the work. I can do the work. I just need I need a little time. Can we get accommodations?
Absolutely.
So if it's a virtual class, the print is zoomed in.
Right.
Asking for those things, and there's an old saying, a closed mouth won't be fed. Well, a person living with migraine won't get their support if they don't vocalize it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I know that we literally are really out of time. I do want to answer the last live question. And then just to give Erin, Erica, and Angel you a heads up, I'm going to ask for one sentence in a minute about what is one thing you know now that you wish you had known before about migraines. I'm giving you like about 60 seconds to think about that. And then literally you have like 30 seconds to answer it. So we had a live question that said, how do you deal with having to go to the emergency room for a migraine and be labeled as a drug seeker? We have all experienced that. I think anybody who has migraine, who's had to go to the emergency room for migraine, it's always like lurking in the back of my head. Am I being labeled as a drug seeker? Sometimes they'll just come outright and say it. We're not going to give you these medications. We're not going to do that for you. Or why are you back again? It's very emotionally traumatic to go to the emergency room for migraine. I would say the way I have dealt with it is I changed doctors so that I have really good headache specialists and have had for decades now, so that they have prescribed me medications that 99.9% of the time have kept me out of the emergency room. I have those treatments at home. In the last 20 years, I've only been to the emergency room one time for a migraine attack, but I used to be a frequent flyer. Literally, like, more than a couple of times a month. And so it's transformed my life, because the emergency room is really not a good place for people who live with migraine. One of the reasons, and only one of the reasons, being that we often are labeled as a drug seeker. So just going to throw that out there again. That can be a whole conversation in and of itself, and maybe we'll talk about that another time. But Erin, I'm going to start with you. One thing you wish you knew before that you know now? 30 seconds.
I wish that I knew that it wasn't my fault.
Awesome. Perfect. Wish you knew that it wasn't your fault. Erica.
I would say seeking a mental health specialist doesn't mean that it's all in your head.
Absolutely. Perfect. Angel.
I wish I knew it wasn't just a headache.
So true. For me, I wish I knew that it could get worse if I kept pushing through and didn't take care of it more effectively. So we're going to close now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Again, thank you to Aaron, Erica, and Angel. Really appreciate you being here. A huge thank you to our sponsors for making this possible. And thank you to everybody who has watched this and will be watching it. So if you or a loved one live with migraine, we know that the impact on life can be huge. I encourage you to explore the Migraine Meanderings website for current evidence-based information. Remember to talk to your headache specialist about how migraine is impacting your life. And we encourage you to connect with others who understand and find the support that you need. Have a great day.